The Canon R6. It's a 20 megapixel full frame camera that came out in 2020. But is it still viable today? So when the Canon R6 released, it was considered by many to be a prosumer level camera. Not quite the camera as its big brother, the R5, but still packed with pro level features. This also made the R6 a slight step above the original Canon EOS R, which had a higher megapixel count, but not quite as many features like dual card slots.
The features.
So with that being said, it does tout a slew of pro level features that aren't offered on a lot of other cameras. And this is especially apparent if you are a photo primary photographer. Now, it does have quite a few video features, but we'll get into that at some point. But for a photo forward camera, the Canon R6 is still a very viable choice, especially if you're shooting weddings or portraits. But not only that, it does function to some extent as a hybrid shooter. Now, real quick, before we get too deep into this, if you guys could like and subscribe to the page, it does help us grow, and we're going to get right into this video. Now, the OG Canon R6 has some features that I would consider paramount if you are a professional level shooter. The thing that I find to be most important, and that is because I shoot a lot of paid things and mostly weddings, is the dual card slots. Built-in redundancy is super important if you are getting paid for your work, and in my opinion, this is a no questions asked. You should have this if you are making money from your professional work. In-body image stabilization is also a nice added feature, not only for photo, but for when you're shooting video as well. And there's a lot of cameras that are not offering this at this price point, especially if you're buying this camera used. And that in-body image stabilization is not only going to help with some shakiness and reduce vibrations, but it can help you slow that shutter speed down a little bit and give you a little bit smoother video footage. Couple that with when you pair it with RF lenses, it can give you up to 8 stops of stabilization. That's pretty wicked. Now, there's a reason that I grabbed for this camera when it comes to shooting weddings, and it's still my primary body despite owning the R5 as well. Its low light performance and dynamic range with that 20 megapixel sensor are pretty much untouched. Couple that with the dual pixel autofocus, 12 frames per second in the mechanical shutter, and up to 20 frames per second in the electronic, which I honestly pretty much never use, and expandable ISO up to 102,400, which I've actually used quite a few times when shooting wildlife. This is pretty much everything that should be standard on a professional level camera.
Let's talk megapixels.
So the megapixel race has been happening for quite a while now, and this is a 20 megapixel camera. But are megapixels really that important? We've seen billboards that were shot on film cameras and even as low as 12 megapixel cameras. So I think the one key factor to note here is the most important thing is proper exposure. If you expose things properly, the megapixels won't play as big of a part. The 20 megapixels on this camera handles the dynamic range really well. In fact, I would argue that the dynamic range is better on this camera, at least in practice, than it is on the more expensive big brother, the R5. It makes it super easy to push not only your shadows, but your highlights, and it's one of the reasons that I find myself reaching for my R6 more than I reach for my R5. And that's not to say that I don't love my R5, I just find that files are a lot more manageable and salvageable on the R6 if I'm shooting in very high contrasting lighting or if I'm shooting at receptions. But another thing to factor in here is don't let that 20 megapixels or low megapixels scare you. There's so many ways to upscale images nowadays if there's a need for it, and they do a pretty good job of it. But as I stated earlier, as long as you're exposing things properly, I highly doubt that you'll have a need to even upscale these images. The images are beautiful out of the R6. I love the colors out of it. It has a great sensor, and the dynamic range is just awesome. Now, considering that this is a hybrid camera and it's primarily photo focused, but it does have a lot of video specs, so let's go over those.
Video features.
Now, while the R6's successor, the R6 Mark II, did vastly improve upon the video features, that doesn't mean that the original R6 was any kind of slouch. In fact, most of the videos that you've seen early on in this channel were shot on my Canon R6. until I switched over to my FujiFilm XS-20, which is what we're shooting on now. But from a professional standpoint, the R6 can handle light video work and even work pretty nicely as a B cam. It has 10-bit 422 color space, it does awesome with dynamic range, and as stated earlier, the in-body image stabilization is going to help you handhold a lot of your shots. Not only that, but it features C-Log3, which is a logarithmic profile, and that's going to help you color grade your footage. So pair the 10-bit 422 with C-Log3, albeit C-Log3 isn't the greatest to color manage, but it is usable for a lot of professional things. And not only that, but the camera does offer 4K 60, so you can get a little bit of slow motion built in there as well. But why do I love this camera so much? And how does it suit my needs? I am primarily a wedding photographer, so let's talk about my experience with this camera.
My experience.
So to put it bluntly, in a professional setting, the R6 is easily my most used camera. The file sizes are absolutely manageable, and that's probably one of my favorite things about it, is that I don't have to downscale anything like I do with my R5 when delivering photos. So I use ShootProof, for example. If I'm exporting photos from Lightroom into ShootProof and I'm shot on the R5, I do have to typically downscale to about 80% quality, just so I can fit those in a 25 megabyte file to upload to my delivery service. I don't have to do that with the R6. Not only that, but as a wedding photographer, there's a reason why the R6 checks all of my boxes. It has dual card slots, which I think is one of the most important features on a professional camera. It has in-body image slabs, and the in-body image stabilization helps things out as well. And not only that, but a lot of the EF lenses offer a great selection, and then you can use RF as well. I tend to lean towards the EF lenses because they adapt to the R series bodies really nicely, but they also adapt to my Blackmagic and my Fujifilm, so it's kind of a no-brainer to shoot EF glass when it's still this good. And I think the fact that I have the R5 and have relegated it to second fiddle to my R6 speaks on how good this camera still is, even 5 years after it was produced. In terms of technology, and especially in the camera industry, the R6 is ancient, but it's still really, really good. Now, I think there's one more thing that we ought to cover here, and I didn't have this scripted in, but something I'd like to talk about. There is a reason that I didn't feel the need to upgrade from the R6 to the R6 Mark II, and the main thing is that it's only a 4 megapixel increase, and most of the other features were in the video department. For video shooting, I have quite a few other cameras that are, my primaries when it comes to video shooting. But we are going to see the R6 Mark III soon, and I think it might be time to upgrade from my original R6 to the R6 Mark III. I will be skipping the second generation R6 Mark II. But anyways, I think I've covered pretty much everything here there is to cover about the original Canon R6. I'd like to thank you guys for stopping by and welcome you to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow, and it helps me bring more videos like this to you guys.